Okay, well, we had identified at the last BHAC meeting that all of us were feeling really just stressed and exhausted with the things that we were all coping with every day, and not only for ourselves and our own families and our own life, but the work that we were doing specifically for older adults as well. So I had seen Paige set up to do a presentation for, I think it was the Arizona Geriatric Society. And I've known Paige for years, and she's a fantastic presenter. And so I was super excited, and I asked her to come do a presentation for us at Pima Council on Aging. I saw that the topic she was doing was really relevant for all of us, and she did such a great job there. And more folks asked if they could see her, so we thought we'd ask her to come here as well. So Paige, you're awesome for being so available for all of us at this time. Paige is a social worker and clinical educator and presenter, and she does a lot of great work in this community. So Paige, I want to turn it over to you and just let us know what you need moving forward.
All right, Lisa, well, thanks. You know, it's so cool. I'm utterly delighted to be here with all of you today. And I see names and I see your faces. I'm like, oh, that's who that is. I'm a native Tucsonan, and I have heard so many of your names for so long, and I know we've had, you know, we've worked together here and there in different projects. I do a lot of end of life as well. So I am just honored to be here with you, and I'm delighted to have this chance to talk to you about this topic that has become so incredibly important for all of us. And I was listening to some of the chatter, and I love to see these groups, and you clearly have such a supportive group with each other and know each other, and there's a lot of new members here. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us to just take some time to be present with each other. And I first want to acknowledge the expertise in this proverbial room that we are sharing, this space that we're sharing together, that all of us, if we were to look at all of our years experience together, it would be in the hundreds, right? Maybe even over 1,000 years of experience right here. To me, that is powerful. So this topic, this originated months ago. It was something that I thought, well, what can I do to contribute? What can I do to help? My world is predominantly post-acute and long-term care. I love nursing homes. That is my love. It's my main practice setting, but I work a lot with staff. And I thought, I know we're all struggling. So I'm hoping that this presentation today gives you some new ideas, some different ways of thinking about things, or even if it's just one slide and like, ooh, that spoke to me, I want to use that. So this material is free for you guys to take, use as you will, and I hope it's meaningful to you. Okay, let's jump in and get started here. So the first thing I want to start with here is acknowledging utterly extraordinary circumstances, work and home, our community, our country, and even the world, that everything we know, day-to-day predictability and consistency are literally gone, or they're completely changed. Our basic assumptions about the world, you know, the things we take for granted without even thinking. We meet a friend for coffee, we go for a meal, we go shopping, and we go do things that we don't even think about doing because they're just part of our fabric, our everyday nature. Usual tasks that work simple take a lot longer, and there's losses, some finances and sense of security. Our routines are different, connections. We can't even do our celebrations like we normally do. There might even be tension amongst our team members, at work, at home, the people that we're serving, and I'll just kind of leave that broadly. My languaging around that is residents and patients. So when I use those words, please use the words that are meaningful for your work setting, individuals or clients, whatever works. So just acknowledging there's incredible change happening around us. And it brings to mind this image here that I wonder if sometimes our heart is literally on our back, and it feels like it's breaking sometimes, that we are being asked to witness incredibly intense and sometimes overwhelming sadness and grief, whether it's our own, the people we serve, their families, our colleagues, our friends. And it's very difficult when we are asked then to be present, to care for other people, when we are seeing repeatedly, whether it's in our immediate sphere, going a little bit larger, or even on a macro level, people that are grieving and dying all around us. So we might feel like we're carrying an incredible weight on our shoulders. I'm going to take us back just a moment in time here, a few months. I picked March as the starting point. So the COVID-19, if we can put it in perspective of that, basically started for all intents and purposes around March. So it might have been a little earlier for some or a little later. And we started as a sprint, that the adrenaline was really pumping. There's an awareness and even an excitement. And I do purposefully use that word excitement, that we're in this together. We can do this. There's something like a crisis that brings us, especially healthcare providers, as all of us are in our different worlds, come together, we can do this. And we're realizing now, oh golly, it's more of a marathon. The adrenaline is still pumping. It's still going, but we're a little bit more weary, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, okay, maybe we're changing again, and it's a shift, and it's a relay now. But I'm going to hand the baton to you all now because, golly, I'm tired. I really do need a break. So we do see some more sharing of the burdens and the tasks, and at the same time, we're seeing more burdens and tasks bubbling up. Quite frankly, we're tired. And I was listening to the chatter amongst you all as we began the meeting and some of the chatting in the box, and I thought, oh golly, people are just so darn tired. We are tired of dealing with COVID. We're tired of the word. We're tired of the implications. We are just simply tired people. And then realizing it's not even a race anymore. It's finding, and if you notice the italicized word, it's the next. It's the next new normal. The new normal, don't even use that word. It's the next new normal, because we are having to change and accommodate almost on a daily basis. This is a mixed feeling here. So heroes work here. Let me start with, of course, every one of you, from frontline workers and physicians and EMTs and grocery store workers and delivery people, everyone that we conceptualize in terms of a hero, absolutely, all of you are doing heroic work. And I am also wondering if that is problematic, because it could be interpreted that when we are labeled as a hero is strong and a hero saves the day, and they shouldn't really cry or show grief or weakness. So I do worry about this label a little bit, and I wonder if when people are labeled that, if it's even harder, especially for healthcare workers like you all of us, me included, harder to ask for and accept help when we have feelings and emotions that may not be in line with what we perceive as a rigid definition of what heroism is. So it's a little mixed. One of the resources I've come across in my work in these last several months is the COVID-19 anxiety workbook. And this quotation stands out to me, that emotional distress is common and normal in the context of uncertainty and potentially life-threatening situations. So I'm speaking to a huge room full of therapists with many, many years of experience. And I think one of the things that we bring to the table collectively is the ability to normalize people's feelings around this. And so I'm going to ask you to do two things here. Think of this material in terms of the people you serve, but also I'm really asking all of us to focus on ourselves today, normalizing our grief, our anguish, our exhaustion internally for ourselves first, because quite frankly, when people feel like this, I do believe it makes caring for ourselves that much more difficult, because we're already so darn tired. We give what we can at work, we give what we can to our families, and there's very little reserve left for ourselves. I think I would be remiss if I did not at least mention these things here as being really important. Of course, exercising, eating right, sleeping well, having routines and hobbies, and connecting with people in any way that we can, even if it's not physically. So let's be honest though, if you've attended workshops or seminars, or you've read something about these things and you kind of acknowledge, yep, it probably is important, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm not going to worry about these so much right now. We kind of poo-poo them, don't we? So I tend to push buttons a little bit, and I think, okay, so what if I told people, well, do not exercise, don't eat well, don't maintain a routine, don't sleep well, and don't connect or have a fun thing to do? You would be like, are you crazy? So I think it helps when we look at it from the opposite perspective. So my purpose here is to acknowledge these are super important, but also let you know that this presentation is not about these things. So what is it about? It's about some tools. We are talking about some tools that I have put together in this very visually oriented presentation to help manage stress and anxiety. And some of these I would imagine that you all are probably doing, so I'm going to maybe do a twist on them or present it in a different way. and remembering that these are for use at home and at work. Kids and partners, spouses, whatever your family structure is, I liken it, I do a lot of analogies in my work, so whether it's a proverbial toolbox, or I think of hobbies. So if you were a painter, you're going to have all these beautiful tools at your disposal. And one day it might be this brush over here, and the next day it might be that brush over there, or this mixture of colors. And it's a toolbox. It's something that we reach into and we work with. That there's no one magical brush that does everything, no one tool. So the tools we're talking about, all of these here, whether you prefer coping mechanisms, self-care strategies, grounding techniques, they're all basically, I'm going to use them interchangeably. The purpose in this framework is that they ease stress and trauma. So one of the organizations I'm involved in a lot is the American Medical Directors Association around post-acute and long-term care. And at our annual conference in April, I had the privilege of listening to two amazing therapists give a wonderful presentation on, they called it provider sustainability, but basically burnout prevention. And one of them said, well, we are in a season of suffering. A season of suffering, and golly, that just really, it spoke to me. That it's not just a day, it's not just one event that kind of a thing happens and then it goes away. It's something, it's a season, it's lasting, it's ongoing, and it's also a time that if we can recognize, it can be a time of change. So we are, and I want to just bring in the word crisis. So we are in a state of crisis, but if you looked at the definition of crisis, the crisis is actually a turning point. A crisis, for those of you who do end-of-life work, it might be a crisis could take us on a trajectory of closer to death and dying. It could be a turning point of recovery and health. So just kind of keeping these ideas and imagery in mind. Talking about suffering, so continuing on this theme for just a moment. So suffering, of course, physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, financially, of course, people are suffering. So suffering is a multi-layered experience, and it might be described by some people, whether it's grief or distress, unhappiness, pain, or trauma. I'm going to land on trauma several times throughout this presentation. So I do a lot of work around trauma-informed care and my world of bringing that into the nursing home. What does that look like? How do we do that? What does staff do? And one of the most important principles is this is a shift. So rather than a what's wrong with you framework to what happened to you, literally I think of it, I'm very visual, so I think of changing my lens. Like, well, what's wrong with you? So if you think of our medical model, well, which we're all probably quite familiar, it's the problem list. So I can go into any nursing home and look at a medical record for Mrs. Smith, and here's the problem list. Well, what's wrong with her, right? Well, the trauma-informed care principles would shift and say, well, what happened to you? So how do we apply this to ourselves? So if we go with the lens of, well, what's wrong with you, it really has a flavor of blame and judgment. So when we switch, instead we approach with a lens of curiosity, of validating, well, what is happening or has happened to you at this point in your time. So we're looking at it very differently and asking different questions. And then recognizing in terms of trauma, COVID-19 and all of the things that that means and all of the realms of our lives that it touches, it is a traumatic experience, but it doesn't automatically mean that we are going to be traumatized. So the emphasis right now is on managing the trauma. I don't believe that we're in a prevention mode yet. Maybe in some ways we are a little bit, but truly right now we are in the midst of this experience of trauma and we are managing it. And we cannot control the trajectory, although we can be in charge of our response. And that's what this program today is about, that we are in charge of how we respond to it. So I hope that's a little empowering for all of us. This is a visual I came across a while back. I just love it. So if you start over on the left, it says, what do I want to be, who do I want to be during COVID-19? So if you notice the fear zone going into the learning and then ultimately the growth zone, I do believe this is a fluid. It's not just a trajectory of linear, progression here. So the fear zone is where there is, we forward all the messages we receive. We are really stuck in that area of fear and anger, and our emotions convey that at all times, versus the learning zone of becoming more aware of the situation. There's a little bit more thinking that goes into before we react. We recognizing, for the most part, I do believe people are trying to do their best, although I know we have challenges around that, especially with distancing and masking and such. And then to the growth zone. So we're seeing in the growth zone more empathy and appreciation and gratitude, and we look for ways to adapt to new changes, which speaks to resiliency. I'll touch on that. So again, we're back and forth. Any one day, you might start out in the fear zone and wind up more in a growth zone, and back and forth. Recognizing, and this is what you all do great, acknowledging that I wonder sometimes if we do such a good job of recognizing risks of unhealthy coping in the people we serve, clients and patients and residents. I hope that we're also recognizing these same risks for ourselves and, of course, for us getting professional help if needed. I gave this talk yesterday to another group, and I had a social worker up in the Phoenix area who volunteered at the end. We generated some dialogue around what are their coping mechanisms, what are they doing, and she volunteered. I'm seeing my therapist more often now. And it was so validating to hear her say that in this group, to acknowledge and normalize it for other people. I was very grateful to her. Ultimately, I am very hopeful, as I'm sure all of you are, that we see less shame and stigma around mental health, that there's no shame in asking for help. I'm not going to put a bunch of statistics up here around domestic violence, but if you think about people being quarantined with partners who are abusive, I know that this is certainly creating incredible stress and strain and challenges in so many different areas. What I'm telling people around this is please, please make the resources available to people. So in the places you work, in your meetings, in your correspondence, this is for staff as well. So making sure as a domestic violence, of course, maybe you all know that if you cannot speak, you can do texting. If you're not in a safe place, suicide prevention, and of course, SAMHSA. So I recently read this darling little book, and I have begun gifting it to friends of mine, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And it's a story about inspiration and hope in uncertain times. And I'd like to share with you, I had to pick just one page to show you, and here's the one I chose. What is the bravest thing you have ever said? Asked the boy. Help, help, said the horse. Every time, and it's been several that I presented this, I get goosebumps, and it almost brings a tear to my eye that when we can utter that one word and just say help, it's so powerful. This is another word. This word is loaded. This word is loaded with baggage. It's a word that we tend to misuse in our culture. I love dictionaries. I love to look words up, and I looked this one up, and it's defined as responsible for a specified wrongdoing. Synonyms include blameworthy and at fault. So I'm going to challenge all of you and ask you, do you ever say, I feel guilty? I feel guilty I'm not doing more. I feel guilty I can't fix this, whatever this is, fill in the blank. And I feel guilty. I just feel guilty. It means that you've done something wrong. I am going to try to reframe this for you. And I'm wondering if we can also do this when we work with people who say those words and really dig a little deeper in what that word means to them. Reframing guilt, which again comes with a lot of baggage, a lot of stuff tied up with that. Reframing it as an experience of sadness. It's probably not guilt. My guess is that the person probably didn't do anything wrong per se. What they're expressing is sadness. I feel sad. I can't take away the pain. I feel so sad. There's a sense of helplessness around this. I know this really describes me on almost a daily basis. I am very sad at what's happening and I can't do more. Crying, it's a natural response. Of course, we know that it releases hormones and toxins. It's a good thing to be able to cry. It's a release valve. But I also acknowledge, as I'm sure you all do, that there's discomfort. And I wonder if there's a discomfort when we personally cry, or if we are uncomfortable. And I'm speaking to a room full of therapists, so I'm certain that there's very little discomfort around people when they do cry, the vulnerability and the rawness around that. So I'm going to ask you, though, focusing on yourselves. If you allow yourself to cry, or if it just bubbles up and there really is no control and the tears come, do you ever say, well, I'm so sorry for crying, I'm sorry? Be honest. When someone is around me that is crying or tearful and they say those words, I'd like to share with you how I respond. I say, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be present with your grief or sadness or hurt. Thank you for trusting me. So it's a validation. It's an acknowledgement. I see you. I'm bearing witness to your grief and your sadness. I'm not going to fix anything. That's not my job. I will bear witness. I will be present with you. I think this is also a powerful thing that we can help teach other people to normalize the expression, the very human nature of crying. I love this quotation by British psychiatrist Henry Maudsley, who says that the sorrow which has no vent in tears may make other organs weep. Another term, if you're not familiar, is comparative suffering. This is an interesting thing. I would highly recommend you guys do some reading on it. I've got a few resources here. Comparative suffering is when you literally rank your problems, your suffering, and compare them to other people. And it's like somehow we think that we'll make our problems lighter, our suffering lighter, but it does the exact opposite. When we deny a voice to our own struggles and fears, when we do not allow ourselves to express our grief and our loneliness, our sadness, our frustration, we actually increase our feelings of exhaustion and overwhelm and worry. So let me show you some examples. Who am I to be upset when there are so many people who have it worse than me? How can I be scared for my children when there are kids who have no place to sleep tonight? Oh my God. Why should I feel tired and angry when so many people don't even have a job right now? They can't make rent. Who am I to complain when we don't have COVID in our facility and some people are dying in facilities every day? Of course, in Arizona, we know we're an epicenter right now. We're seeing the deaths all around us. So these are examples of comparative suffering. So a couple things here. Number one, we all deserve to feel our feelings. Yes, we do need to keep them in perspective, but if we deny the permission to feel and express our feelings, they are simply going to dig in deeper and come out in other ways. So I'm sure all you know Brené Brown. So one of the podcasts I've listened to a couple of times now, it's fabulous. She talks about fear and scarcity that are driving a lot of our thinking and feeling right now. So fear and scarcity, all you have to do is look at the stories on the internet or in the paper, right? So at a societal and a cultural level, we are so deep in fear and scarcity. Things like, I'm not enough, we don't have enough, and when is there going to be enough? She talks about scarcity leadership right now, and what that sounds like is the messaging around, well, what should I be afraid of right now, and whose fault is it? Boy, don't we see a lot of that right now. When we are in a mindset that is governed by fear and scarcity, scarcity which is born of fear, what happens is that we trigger something called, we trigger comparison. Our pain and hurt are not even immune to being assessed and ranked. The thing that we need to understand, like those statements I just shared with you, well, I don't have it bad enough, other people have it worse than me. If I keep telling myself, well, then I don't have permission, that I'm not suffering enough, I don't score high enough on the suffering board to warrant that, those emotions are going to double down and fester, and they're going to grow. And then what happens, and of course, you know, Brené is the expert on vulnerability and shame. What she teaches is that when you invite shame into the mix, it sounds something like this. Well, now I'm a bad person because I'm angry, sad, scared, lonely, I'm pissed off, and quite frankly, other people have it so much worse than me. Therefore, I don't score high enough to deserve my feelings. Folks, this is a really, really bad place for all of us to be. What she does is she talks about empathy, and she relates it to, quite frankly, a pizza. So let me teach you how she does that. A pizza has a finite number of pieces. There's 8 pieces here. I can make it 16, or if you're not very hungry, I guess I could make it 32 and you get one little nibble. When it's gone, it's gone. When we talk about comparative suffering, it is so very dangerous because there's a false belief that empathy, like this pizza, is finite. In other words, that it's limited, that if I practice empathy with myself of being kind and gentle and loving, or if I give myself permission to feel my emotions and seek resources, somehow that means I'm going to have less to give. But that's wrong. Empathy is infinite. It doesn't need to be rationed. In fact, when we practice empathy with ourselves and others, we create more empathy. So if you think about it, let's think about a person in your life who is suffering. Maybe they are suffering in a way that's different than you. Perhaps you know someone who has lost a loved one from COVID or has suffered a tragedy. If you deny yourself empathy, a kind, loving attitude to yourself, does it somehow do better for that other person? The answer is no, it does not. So I think it's offering us a way to think differently about how to tend to our own feelings, to increase our compassion and empathy for ourselves, which increases it for others. So let's shift a little bit and talk about stress response. So there's a lot of stress going on, and just real briefly, let's talk about what it does to our body. So here's the amygdala, that little tiny part of your brain. The main job is to keep us safe. And when that little part of your brain is stressed or anxious or angry, it takes over. When your brain is stressed or anxious, that little part takes over. It turns on the fight, flight, or freeze. We don't control it. It just happens. The prefrontal cortex, when the amygdala is in charge, that little part goes offline. It shuts down. So the rational decision-making part of our brain goes offline because all of our energy is dedicated to being safe. The amygdala is literally known, you guys know this, as the reptilian brain. The main purpose is to keep us safe. So imagine if we work with people, I'm going to shift for a moment from you all to the people we serve, of teaching people about this very normal part of our human biology and helping them to understand when they have these stress and anxiety responses, what literally is happening in their body, in their brain. So here's the way I would go about teaching that, is that we are not fighting for our lives from this particular threat. So if you saw this bear, certainly fight, flight, flee, you're going to do one of those. But the fear, the new threat looks like this. And we can't even see that little sucker without the most powerful electron microscope. So here's what happens when we have a stress response. The amygdala comes alive. It turns on. So if you saw this, is it a stick or a snake? So we receive input from the environment, stick or snake, don't know. You have no control over what your brain thinks it is, because what's going to happen immediately is that your amygdala is going to burst into action. It is literally going to light up, and then what happens is your biology picks. It's going to fight if there's a chance to maybe ward off the threat. If not, we're going to run, or we're going to freeze. So a lot of the people that we work with they have experienced an experience of abuse or neglect where their biology chose to freeze. So they are stuck in that area. This happens automatically, okay? When they can't fight, they can't run away, they are going to freeze and dissociate. So whether the threat is perceived or real, it doesn't matter. Your biology reacts the same way. So let's put that in perspective of COVID. What happens When our body, when our mind, we receive all of this information, all of this stimulus from the environment. So this is all the information coming at us so often, and we tell each other and our clients, people we take care of, turn the TV off. Don't look at the news as often. So we have all this information from the environment. The amygdala bursts into action, just like it does when there was a stick or a snake or a threat. And once again, our biology picks. So we're back at this same loop all over again. I read an interesting article a while ago, and it made the analogy that when the people we work with, so for example, if you were working with someone that appears, if you would have, maybe if they appear as non-compliant or combative, it could actually be that that person is struggling to regain or hold on to control. So they're in a fight stress response. Flight, if that person is resistant or uncooperative in general, it could actually be evidence that they are disengaging or withdrawing from the experience. They are fleeing. If a person is very passive and unmotivated, it could be that they are giving into those in power. They have entered a freeze state. So in my work in nursing homes, this really helped me understand better when residents, and I hear staff, well, they're just non-compliant, they're resistant, or they refuse care. It begins to help us understand the biological response that might be rooted in trauma. So what happens is, again, the biology reacts the same. The anxiety causes the amygdala to go in a stuck. It's a mistrigger where that amygdala is literally like a light switch that's stuck on all the time. So we're constantly in this state of anxiety. So I have no doubt that all of us can relate to this. And being constantly in that aroused state is certainly not a good place to be. Here's some of the things that might be causing that anxiety state. Statements or thoughts or fears. I'm not safe. My family's not safe. I might get sick or get someone else sick. That's a biggie for people who work in a healthcare setting. They worry about bringing it into the clients or residents, and I'm scared, worried, and angry. And then what happens, my analogy is the thoughts in the hamster wheel that go round and around. And then enter the picture. We've got stress and anger, anxiety, and fear, and all of this gets mushed around, and that little wheel is going so fast. We're entering a stress response. Our biology picks. Here we are again. Once again, right? Just take a breath. One of my favorite books, Life of Being, Having, and Doing Enough by Wayne Muller. I'd like to read you just a brief excerpt. He says that worry comes with an implicit promise that abiding in its company will ensure that our problem will be solved. That we can somehow actually worry it away, fix it before anything bad happens. But worry is a false promise. It's a Trojan horse and a wolf in sheep's clothing. And while neither healing or repairing anything at all, it saturates us with stress and uses all of our attention to project fear and weakness into every possible future disaster. And we manufacture catastrophic reactions which cause our biological and nervous system to remain forever on full exhausting alert. What he's talking about right there is what we just said. The amygdala gets stuck in the on position. We are constantly in a state of stress and arousal. So how do we do this? So in my work around end-of-life care, this is the analogy. If I were to be working with a family, any family for any reason, any individual, and they're over on the left, and their emotions are so high that they're so cloudy, they literally cannot see through the muddy water. We know that we have to help settle to some degree. Do I think we're going to get to that right-sided jar? No, of course not. But we have to acknowledge and try to settle before we can make productive headway. Settling is not a one-time event. You guys all know it could happen multiple times a day. When we get agitated or we have new input or stimulus from our environment, I find myself, recognizing, getting agitated. What do I need to do right now to go back to settle? And I use the things that I'm going to teach you in this. So literally what we're doing here is we're transitioning. We're going from the reptilian brain to the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, but we're going to take it a step further. We're going to go from the thinking brain, we're going to shift into a more body experience. We're inviting awareness. We're engaging our body more. Our bodies are super cool. They're equipped to give us warning signs, just like the car, that little check engine light on your vehicle. Our job is to learn to pay better attention to them. I'll speak for myself. This is an ongoing challenge. Learning what the warning signs are for us individually, knowing when they pop up, seeing it when they're coming, and then taking appropriate intentional action. I call this intentional noticing. In my world, I really try to bring a lot more intentionality to the actions, to the thoughts, the words. So I'm going to ask you to do some intentional noticing at this moment and how we catch our own stress responses. So where is the discomfort showing up for you at this time? So in the next 2 slides, I'm going to give you some possibilities. This is not exhaustive, but if you could just take a moment, even jot down which ones resonate with you. So your own self-awareness. How does your body communicate overwhelm or anxiety or stress, whatever the word is that fits for you? So in a physical realm, is it you breathe more shallowly? Does your heart rate go up? Do you clench your teeth? Are your shoulders up at your ears? Are they squinched up? Is your face creased? Are your muscles tense? And then behaviorally or emotionally, is it anger or blame or fearfulness, irritability? Do you just feel kind of hopeless and exhausted? So take a moment. Which of those resonate with you? The second slide. So it also affects us cognitively. So there's a lot of fear, losing control, fear of injury or death, of going crazy, frightening thoughts and images that keep playing over and over and over in your mind, difficulty concentrating, hypervigilance, difficulty reasoning. So all of these are also symptoms of anxiety or overwhelm. So again, if you could just jot down real quickly which ones resonate with you. I will be working with that material again in just a moment, but I'm going to take a quick side trip and just talk for a moment about anger. Perfectly normal human reaction. And I think if there were one, there are several, but this is one of the emotions that if we could help normalize for people, especially in this state, this experience that we are living in of this COVID world, there's a lot of anger, and it's justifiable. We are being asked and taxed in so many different ways that I think if we can just validate for each other, I get it, I hear you, you are so pissed off right now, you're so angry. We don't have to judge or anything else, just normalizing it. This is a helpful image I've used for so many years in my work. And it was funny, one day I came home from the store and my husband, I told him about an experience that was just rather unpleasant at the store. And he's like, oh, angry person. Well, which one of those do you think might have been from the iceberg? I was like, okay, I see where you're going with this. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's talk about that. If you could imagine the last time you felt angry or you encountered an angry person, if you could look beneath the water and pick out what might have been going on a little bit deeper, because the anger is what we see on the surface. And we all know there's a lot more going on beneath. And I think the naming of this, helping people, maybe showing this image, say, do any of these speak to you? I'm wondering if we can talk more about this. Did they feel worried or insecure or annoyed or trapped or attacked? There's so many other words and experiences to help deepen the experience and the dialogue around anger. The signs that I had you hopefully jot down, physical, behavior, emotional, and cognitive, those are signs that in the analogy of a stoplight, those are like the yellow light. So hopefully when you all come to a yellow light when you're driving, that we are of the kind that we do slow down and we are prepared to stop. We don't speed up and try to make it through. The yellow light signs that our bodies give us are a signal to slow down. Be aware and be prepared to stop. I'll share with me, irritability is a big one for me. I know when I'm getting irritable with something, I need to name it and take a different course. I know that's one of my big signs, my yellow light. what we're trying to do here is help us to recognize when we're stuck in this anxiety loop and disrupt it. I don't feel that we can really, and maybe we can sometimes stop it, but it felt more realistic to me to say, well, how can we disrupt this anxiety loop? One of the ways is the intentionality of the noticing. So what is actually happening in this moment? What are the signs of overwhelm? So the things that you might have jotted down. And then asking yourself, is my assessment of the current situation, is it accurate? Is there more information? Am I operating or making decisions on too limited amount of information? The intentional noticing can be a very powerful physical experience. So if you could for a moment, physically, where do you notice the stress showing up in your body? Where does it bubble up? Is it in your tummy? Do you clench your teeth? Is your forehead creased? Are your shoulders up? If you could identify for a moment where it's showing up in your body, and then I want you to be intentional and maybe look at your hands, your thigh, maybe touch your earlobe, and I want you to find a place in your body that's very quiet, that's calm, not agitated. And it's the actual intentional act of shifting your focus. Right now, I am looking at my hand. I'm looking at my fingers. They're calm and they're still, they're settled. So imagining being in that place in your body rather than focusing all of our attention on where it's showing up as stress. As the therapist and all the work that you all do, I'm sure that you bring in resilience every day into your work. I would like to remind us that we're talking about resilience, our own resilience. The definition I like is the American Psychological Association that adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats are significant sources of stress. It doesn't mean that we don't have difficulties or distress in our lives, but the resilience is a trait that we can learn and adapt to. It's something ordinary. It's not extraordinary. It's not like some people were blessed with resilience. Every one of us, and I'm sure the people you work with, one of the things you try to do is find those times in their lives when they were resilient and bring those skills to bear on the current challenge or crisis. One of the things I've been encouraging people to do is to celebrate resilience in residence, so my world of nursing homes, residents, so staff, clients, whatever it is that works for you. But as human beings, we are very natural, powerful storytellers. That's what we do. We tell stories. That's how we learn. So I would encourage all of you, ask people to tell stories. Tell your own stories of your resilience. Maybe at your staff meetings, one person, two people every time, 3 stories. Just share stories of resilience, because I think it's a very empowering experience to hear how everyone else is being resilient and to share my own story. Taking this a step further, my husband, he's a physician, a long-term care physician, but he's also a playwright. And a few months ago in his playwright group, the old Pueblo Playwrights, I'll put a plug for them, they began doing monologues of their experiences with living and working in a pandemic. They began performing them on their Zoom meetings. Very powerful. And I thought, oh, we could do this in nursing homes. We can do this wherever we are. Ask people to speak about their stories of resilience. So strengthening resilience does not mean that we deny that there's grief and loss and anger and frustration. We name those things. We allow the grief to be present. And then when we are ready, we do shift the focus to resilience, to strengthening what we can do. But we have a little problem here, don't we? We have this thing in the room. This elephant represents the idea that most people, and I'm going to hold all of you, I'm going to put your toes to the fire a little bit here because I can't see you, and this is one of the times when I wish I could, that I'm wondering if some of us believe that our self-care is not a priority, that we tend to prioritize everyone else's health and well-being before ours, if we even get to prioritize ours at all. So I'm naming that, and I'm going to delineate between selfishness, which is doing for my own self at the expense of you. So if I'm selfish, it's me, and more of me. If I'm practicing self-care, it's a different mindset. It's I'm going to take care of me so I can bring my best self to you, to my work, to my experience, to my partnerships, my husband, my son, my work, my you all. I take care of me to bring my best self to you. So I began teaching, I think there's a role for permission for self-care, that we have to give ourselves permission. I give my friends permission to take care of themselves. It's the act of saying, hey, this is a good thing for you to do. Do you need permission for this? And then a few months ago, a colleague of mine said, you know, Paige, it's more like a responsibility. Okay, I hear you. I like that. And then what happened was I was on a webinar, the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization did a webinar about a month ago. Same speaker, Carla Cheatham out of Texas. And I was like, oh, here she is again. Now she says, you know what? It's not just permission. It's not just responsibility. It's a clinical competence. And that stopped me in my tracks. A clinical competence. That even spoke to me more deeply than these other concepts. So I'm asking you all, yes, permission, it's a responsibility, but when we put it in the words of clinical competence, that elevates it to a whole new level. It's part of our responsibility as clinicians in whatever role we have. The challenge is that it's a practice, right? Coping strategies, self-care, it's not a one and done. If you want to increase your strength, you don't go to a gym or you don't go lift weights just one time and say, woo, did it, I'm done now. Feelings of hope and gratitude, mindfulness, they are practices. They're not just feelings. So we have to create space and do these consistently. I love this definition by John Kabat-Zinn. He says that mindfulness is moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness, that paying attention on purpose in the present moment, the intentionality. Coupling your practice of mindfulness, and my guess is that you probably do some of these already, that you couple it with things you do every day, answering a call, sending a text, walking through a doorway, eating or drinking, that we couple it with something we're already doing, and to becoming more aware. We have to not only intentionally couple the mindfulness task with something we do, but we have to be aware of the shift that it's bringing about in our physical and our mental well-being. So those same speakers at that conference in April also introduced the concept of riding the wave of discomfort. This is the image. I'm a very visual learner, so the image I'm like, oh, here we are. And I really don't like to be in water. I'm definitely not a surfer. But this image came to mind, like, ooh, I'm on that surfboard. We don't really have much choice except to ride the wave. Here is another choice. Radical acceptance, that we accept the reality without resistance. Now, don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to agree with what is happening, or that you can't or you won't work to make it better. That's not correct. It's simply the statement of, all right, this is happening, how do I manage it, instead of resisting it. For those of you who want a little bit more formal definition, it's the practicing radical acceptance simply means that you are recognizing reality, what happened or is happening, because fighting against it will only intensify your emotional reaction. So we accept the loss, we accept the pain without fighting it. It's happening. I do not like this, and I can handle it. So what we're doing is intentionally focusing our energy, collaborating and building partnerships like what we're doing together today. Problem solving rather than focusing our energy, our precious, limited energy on resisting a painful reality. I am also compelled to share this concept, and I think it bears repeating, that as healthcare providers in whatever role you serve, all of us, I know, go to work every day to relieve stress and pain and suffering and grief. And I think if we can also accept that the need will always be greater than the resources, I know for me that helps me settle a little bit, to at least allow the acknowledgement that we will not fix everything today. We will never fix everything, because there will always be more need than we have available to give. So we need to find a way to accept that. The other thing we need to accept is that there's going to be fear and anxiety. So years ago, one of my very first social work jobs, I worked with a nurse, Chris, and she said to me, she taught me, I'll never forget it, this is more than 20 years ago. Every day she wakes up and she says, Paige, I just wake up and I say to fear, I see you, let's go to work, come on, let's go. And it was very powerful, and as I grew in my own experience, my professionalism, it spoke to me even more deeply. That we don't get rid of fear and anxiety in our world, it's how we manage them. So the concept here is you acknowledge it's there, put that fear and anxiety in the passenger seat, or better yet, put it in the back seat, and you tell it, you are not driving this car today. You are not driving the car today. I am still in charge. Another very powerful concept is the word and. Such a tiny, powerful little word. It is the intentional act of holding to sometimes conflicting thoughts or emotions. Let me show you what I mean by this. I'm scared about going to work, and I am eager to help the residents. So clearly that's an example in a nursing home. This is a big one for staff. I am angry about the restrictions in my daily life, and I am grateful that those restrictions are helping my family be safer. So literally, I am holding my hands out right now at my own desk. I'm holding both thoughts. Here's some more. So I showed you these before. I'm not safe. My family isn't safe. I might get sick. I might get someone else sick, and I'm scared, worried, and angry. If we were together in the same room, I would ask you to get out a piece of paper and put the word and. What would your and be? I'm not safe. My family isn't safe. And I am following all protocols and taking necessary precautions. Well, I might get sick or get someone else sick. And the majority of people who get the virus recover. I am scared and worried and angry. And I am resilient. So I'm acknowledging both. I'm not saying that the fear isn't there. Yes, you could, any one of us any day could be sick. Absolutely, we know that. But we're choosing to focus our light differently. Literally, if you took a flashlight, do you choose to focus your light here? Well, I might get sick and something bad could happen, which of course it could. Even without the pandemic, folks, this is true, right? We all know this. So are you going to shine your light there or here? The majority of people who get the virus recover. It's a choice. It's a choice. A wonderful TED Talk, or I'm not going to listen to it today, but love this guy. He's hilarious, by the way. I laughed the whole way through this, but it was so true. He said one of the things, 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. Isn't that interesting? By the way we process the world. So what is this? Is it a duck or is it a rabbit? So for those of you who've already seen it, you already know where I'm going with this. What happens is, for years, I was in the camp that it was a duck. Every time I looked at it, duck, 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 duck. And my colleague said, Paige, do you not see the rabbit? And I was like, oh, wow, there is a rabbit there. But it was a beautiful example of how we tend to get stuck in our initial assumptions, because the problem is that ambiguity, human beings do not like ambiguity. We don't like I don't know. We don't like not knowing what's going to happen. So resilience is about thriving even in a state of ambiguity, and we have a lot of ambiguity right now because we do not know what's happening. One of the things we can do for ourselves and give ourselves a little bit more grace. This is a wonderful mantra. You are doing everything you can given these extraordinary circumstances. Allowing more grace to enter your being, to enter your life. So we're going to talk a little bit more now about shifting from more of the cognitive realm, inviting more awareness with the sensory. Again, I come back again and again, intentionality. That if I'm on the left side of the tracks, if I am over here and I am stuck in that anxiety loop, I do have choice to change tracks, to shine my light in a different place. It takes awareness. And so we bring in the idea of grounding. I'm sure you guys use these in your work. a method of distraction to get us out of our head, away from upsetting thoughts and upsetting feelings and memories, grounding us with the earth and with nature. So of course, this is a key principle in trauma-informed care. Not too long ago in the Journal of American Medical Directors, it said that the lower incidence of in-hospital falls in patients hospitalized in window beds than non-window beds. Does it surprise anyone? If you go to the hospital, or in my world of nursing homes, people always want the window bed. Of course we do, right? This is where our nature as human beings to feel connected to the earth. There's actually a medical study called forest bathing. So Dr. Lee is a preeminent physician, over 30 years has studied the physiological responses of being in the forest. So in Japan, they have forests. So out here, for those of you in Arizona, and I know that we have callers from different parts, our forest here in Arizona might look a little different with palo verdes and mesquite trees and a bunch of cactus. But the idea of being out in nature and the effect that it has on our body is very powerful. It's proven again and again. It's a lovely book if anyone's a reader. Breathing is essential to our essence, to being alive, for calming anxiety, relieving symptoms. But the thing is that most of us actually breathe incorrectly, that we take shallow, short breaths instead of engaging our abdominal muscles and breathing very deeply. That we tend to tell people, if someone's agitated, what do we say to them? We say, well, take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath. Well, I'm going to turn that around a little bit. There's actually some research, some people, some camps that would say exhale actually comes first. And the resource I have here, I've heard this for years. I know for me it works. The exhaling comes first, that we have to exhale the old air, exhale through the nose, before we can inhale the new fresh air through the mouth. And there are many, many, many different, of course, you guys know this, breathing techniques. I happen to choose this one because one of the things I think is that some people have the mindset that these are not very powerful exercises, that, well, breath work. Oh, we don't need to do that. I breathe just fine. Well, this is from the Navy SEALs. So the YouTube video is right there. When a Navy SEAL is in a combat situation and they're actually literally life and death, what they are taught to do is breathe. And I thought, well, if that can't convince people that Navy SEALs are doing this stuff, I'm going to have to find a different way, I guess. But one thing I did change with this visual is that instead of the inhale first, I acknowledge, I put the exhale. So doing a few circuits of this, a few rounds of this, whatever breathing technique, and there are many, it might invite a yawn. And this is another time that I wish I could see you all, because I have a feeling a lot of you see I'm struggling to hold my yawn in. Whatever it is, yawning is contagious. The science is not clear. I tried to figure it out, read a lot of stuff, and I thought, forget it. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is that when you yawn, you are getting more oxygen into your blood and your system. It invites a breath. To me, anytime that we invite breath into our being, that's a good thing. So making yourself yawn, opening your mouth, opening your jaw really wide, inviting that body to yawn, super good thing. So what we're doing here, we're in that part of the presentation where we're talking about literally being very intentional, changing tracks, trying different things to disrupt the anxiety loop. Music is a great one. Blasting your favorite music, and hopefully when you drive, you're not driving like this guy is with his eyeballs, or his eyelids, I suppose, closed. But acknowledging that music is a very, very powerful distractor. It gives us chills and goosebumps. Think about your favorite song. Happiness. What happens when we listen to music, the research is very clear on this. So music and memory, for those of you who work with dementia, people living with dementia, the power of music. We get flushes of dopamine. So dopamine, of course, is that happiness-inducing chemical. It's a super good thing. So that is why we play our favorite songs over and over again, is because we get flushes of dopamine. Another way to disrupt the anxiety loop, and I'm not suggesting we resort to food all the time, but very strong flavors like a peppermint, sucking on a lemon. These are things that when we invite this different awareness in, it helps us transition away from the anxiety into a different sensory experience. Same thing with smells, peppermints and oils and candles. In the nursing home, I've read bazillions of care plans that say aromatherapy. And I really don't know if staff understand why that is so powerful, that when we have someone who is agitated, who is experiencing agitation, and however that manifests, what physiologically happens when we introduce calming smells. If I go to the grocery store, one of the things I love to do the most, if I'm not doing as much, I love the smell of tomatoes. That smell and basil, mint, do it for me every time. It takes me to a very happy place. Texture and touch are very powerful. If you have kids or you know people who have kids, they've done that exercise where they have to go around the house and find a bunch of things that are different sensories, textures. This little girl is holding that teddy. What that's probably doing for her is many different things. Not only is it the touch of her bear, the softness of it, the squishiness of it, it's also the smell of it. How about for adults? This is a delightful story about a gentleman in England who, after being married for 71 years, his wife died. He went to sleep with a photo frame of his wife every single night. He took it to bed. So, and I don't know what they call them in England, but our equivalent of a nursing assistant, the 17-year-old young woman made him a pillow of his wife. And look at him, he's crying and holding it to the people in the room. Look at her, isn't she beautiful? And he's hugging her. Very sensory, stimulating. So it's a very visceral thing as human beings. The touch and the texture are powerful. Wiggling your body, working with someone, I'm sure that this is a grounding technique that I imagine you all use. Literally right now, wiggle your bum, move your cheeks in your chair, wiggle back and forth, tap your feet on the floor, reminding us that we are grounded in the present moment. We are not stuck in a traumatic reaction. What colors do you see? So I'm inviting the visual sensory here. Nursing unit, you can do it wherever you are. What colors do you see? Name objects, smallest to largest, largest to smallest. Go outside if you can. I realize in Arizona, this may not be the most pleasant time to go outside barefooted, but looking around and saying, well, what do I see? What colors? What do I see? So I'm inviting awareness other than my cognitive, my anxiety loop. What do I hear? Sensory distractors. This has been a popular one. Every time I give this one, many people have said, oh, I'm going to try this one. Putting an ice cube in your hand and shifting the awareness from the anxiety loop that a person is stuck in. Imagine putting an ice cube in your hand, and you're going to be looking at that. It's cold. It may not be especially unpleasant unless you're holding a big old block of ice for an extended period of time, but it's melting and it's dripping, and now it's on the floor. So it's a multi-sensory experience to hold the ice cube. So it could be a very effective distractor. When a person is stuck in that anxiety loop, it helps them to step out of that fight, flight, or freeze state. Another good one, just in general, what touches your soul? What stimulates you to laugh and to cry? So I'm talking more about tears of laughter right now, or joy. One that gets me, I'll share a personal story. Susan Boyle in 2009, she got onto the stage of Britain's Got Talent. She sang a song called I Dreamed a Dream. Every time I watch that video, I cry and I laugh. The other one for me is Cookie Monster. Now, I get it. Y'all might not be Cookie Monster fans, and that's fine. He makes me laugh. So he does this series. See, I'm going to start laughing. He does this series commercial, and he's so impatiently waiting for those cookies to get done. So he's like licking the flour off the countertop. He's taking the measuring spoons and winging them around his finger, and they go flying. It's just so funny. So here he's trying to eat the image, the reflection of the cookies. It makes me laugh. Okay, so what is it that makes you all laugh? In Tears of Joy and Happiness, I read a lovely article, and the author, she wrote, I use the word melting, letting go of their guard, their defenses, and tapping into a deep place inside themselves. I just get goosebumps reading that. Tears of joy, laughter. This woman, she's the receptionist at one of the buildings where my husband works. She just brings joy wherever she goes. So obviously this is around Easter time. She makes people laugh. I can see her laugh in her eyes right now. some more ideas of grounding, literally touching the earth, being grounded. Things like, this situation will not last forever. It will pass. I can write it out. Use these, mix them up, make up your own. The people you work with, empower them to make up their own statements. Snuggling pet therapy animals. This is a huge one in my life. I got 3 dogs. Just the act of squinching up one of my dogs, kissing their head, helps ground, helps settle. So again, what we're doing here in this segment is we are helping shift from the anxiety loop, which is the then and there. So as we see people and we're witnessing more traumatic reactions and experiences, we're helping give them tools in their toolbox, whatever that looks like for them, bringing them into the here and now. Just a few slides, getting close to the end here. You know, I want to remind us that the analogy, if I were to hand this little infant to you, you're going to reach your arms out. You're going to gently cradle that baby. You're going to touch its soft head and see the little fuzzy hair and that little finger. We tenderly hold these children like this, but somehow we lose this as we grow up and get older. I'm going to invite you all to think about holding yourself, your pain and your grief and your resilience as tenderly as you would hold this baby. Years ago, I went to, and maybe some of you were at the same one as I was, Imam Jamal Rahman. He did a wonderful workshop about compassion. He actually had us throughout the day several times creating mercy and gentleness, self-talk. He had us, please, if you would, humor me. I can't see you, so it's okay. Put your hand on your heart and just gently tap, tap, tap. What words could you say to yourself? Like your soul is aching, Paige. Your soul is aching for peace and comfort. It's okay. It's just okay. Visibly touching my body, touching myself and saying it's okay. It's okay. Blessing others quietly and secretly. May you be at peace and may you be safe. This works well if you see someone who's agitated or angry in public. Feeling the blessing, and this is not necessarily a religious connotation, it's just offering a good space to another human being who is suffering. Mantras, perhaps some of you have some that work for you. One of mine is the third. May there be joy in this day, and may I bring joy to others. I say it almost every day. Sometimes when I'm a bit more weary, I just offer up thanks. Thank you for the day. Thank you for whatever this day might bring, and may I bring joy. A Buddhist saying is that may all beings be healed, may all beings be at peace, may all beings be free from suffering. Acknowledging what we do. If you are like me, you love lists. I love a list. I love to mark things off of my list, but I have a little bit of a problem because I get so wrapped up in marking things off, I don't even give myself credit for what I've accomplished. I tend to focus on what I've not accomplished. You know, you guys, in this state of a pandemic and the stress of what we're all working with, just helping people every day, being kind and offering a word of kindness, showing up. Give yourself credit. Validate yourself for the care that you do give and for simply showing up. And if this could be our world, what if love, hope, love, and kindness were the virus and it became an epidemic? Love this. Coming close to the end here, just reminding us again, having clear boundaries between work and home and work, especially for those of us that are working at home right now. This is a little tougher because we're in the same space a lot of the time. So actual having an activity to physically and mentally separate these two. One of the ones is a badge ritual. I've heard it said that some people are wearing their badges while they're at work, even at home. When they are done with their workday, they take that badge off and put it away. If you leave your job, when you go home, put your badge in a place. I don't work for fill in the blank. I'm done now with work. It's no longer where my focus is. Avoiding and discouraging sliming. That's actually a professional term. It's the setting of boundaries. When we are bearing witness, which a lot of us are, to the grief and the suffering of the people you work with, we want to release valve. So sometimes we might go home and we inadvertently slime the people around us, or we might even do it at work. It's the debriefing without permission or warning. There's no part of choice. So there's a concept called low impact debriefing. I don't have time to go into, but I think it warrants discussion of how to do this in our professional and personal lives. Because what happens when we slime someone, especially if the material is potentially emotional or graphic, that person then needs to discharge that emotion and they go and spread it. So we need to work on this a bit. The bottom line is, where are you going to shine your light? Is it being present? Is it radical acceptance? Noticing the signals, compassionate self-talk. What is it that spoke to you? What are you doing? Picking one strategy, practicing it, and I'm literally preaching to the choir of the importance of mental health and no more shame. So do something, commit to intentionality, taking action, and I just leave you with, please trust the ripple effect of kindness bestowed upon yourself and the effect that that has upon the people that you serve and the people in your life. So Lisa, with that, I will turn it to you, and I'm happy to stay if there's any questions or comments, anything people would like to share.
Thank you. That's awesome, Paige. We really, really appreciate you being here. We have a request from Liz Cozy, if we could share the slides. I not only have the slides I can share, Liz, I've been recording the presentation so I can share the recording with you as well. That way you get to hear all the stuff that Paige is saying beyond just what's on the slides. So. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.